unsolved, Colorado cold case. Before we begin, take a moment. Breathe. Because what you are about to hear did not happen to a character in a novel or a face on a fictional missing poster. It happened in a quiet mountain-edge town in Colorado to a 5-year-old boy named Jacob Turner, a child with a gap-toothed smile, a collection of toy trucks he lined up along his bedroom windowsill every single night before bed, and a laugh that, according to everyone who ever heard it, sounded like bells tumbling down a staircase. It was a Sunday in late September 2009. The aspens outside the small town of Montrose, Colorado had already started their annual turn, pale gold catching the morning light, trembling in a wind that carried the first real bite of autumn. The Turner family home sat on a half-acre lot at the end of Creekside Drive, a gravel road that petered out into scrub brush and open field. It was the kind of neighborhood where people still let their children play outside, where screen doors banged shut and nobody locked their cars. Jacob Turner disappeared from that yard sometime between 9:47 in the morning and 10:15 in the morning on September 27, 2009. He was 5 years old. He weighed 43 pounds. He was wearing a red hooded sweatshirt and rubber boots printed with yellow frogs. His father, Derek Turner, reported him missing at 10:32 a.m. For the next 10 years, the question that haunted Montrose County, the question that haunted every investigator who ever read the file, every neighbor who ever replayed that morning in their mind, was not merely where Jacob went. The question was, who took him there? To understand what happened to Jacob Turner, you first have to understand the Turners themselves, because on the surface, they were the kind of family that defied easy suspicion. Derek Turner was 34 years old in the autumn of 2009. He worked as a crew supervisor for a road paving company that contracted with Montrose County, a job that kept him outdoors 6 days a week from spring through early November, and then largely idle through the winter months. He was a large man, 6'2", broad through the shoulders, with the kind of hands that looked like they could fix anything and the quiet disposition of someone who preferred work to words. Neighbors described him as polite, reliable, the kind of man who shoveled your sidewalk without being asked. Amanda Turner, 31, had grown up in Montrose. She worked part-time at a dental office on Main Street, 3 days a week, and spent the rest of her time with their 2 children, Jacob, 5, and his older sister, Brianna, who had just turned 8 the previous month. Amanda was warm in the way that makes people gravitate toward you, quick with a coffee offer, quick with a laugh, the person who remembered your mother's name and asked after her health. Together, they had built a life that fit their surroundings like a hand inside a well-worn glove. They attended Grace Lutheran Church most Sundays. They hosted a 4th of July cookout every year. They drove a used F-250 and a sensible Subaru, respectively. Jacob was, by all accounts, an ordinary 5-year-old in the best possible sense of the word. His kindergarten teacher at Lincoln Elementary, Mrs. Patricia Halst, would later describe him as curious and energetic, a child who collected rocks and asked questions that seemed beyond his years. He had recently become obsessed with everything related to construction equipment, trucks, cranes, bulldozers. He could identify a front-end loader from 100 yards. He slept with a yellow toy excavator tucked under his pillow. September 27, 2009, began as an unremarkable Sunday. Amanda had left that morning at approximately 9:15 a.m. to drive her mother, Patricia Greer, to a church women's group meeting 20 minutes away in Olathe. Brianna had spent the previous night at a sleepover at a friend's house on the other side of town, which meant that on that particular Sunday morning, Derek Turner was alone at the house with Jacob. According to Derek's initial statement to the Montrose County Sheriff's Office, He had put Jacob outside in the backyard at around 9:45 a.m. with a bucket of plastic construction vehicles. The morning was cool but dry, around 48 degrees Fahrenheit, with a pale blue sky and the faintest trace of cloud along the western ridge. Derek told deputies he had gone inside to make coffee and watch a football pregame show on television. At approximately 10:15 a.m., Derek said he went back outside to check on Jacob and found the backyard empty. The bucket of toy trucks sat tipped on its side near the fence line, the vehicles scattered across the damp grass as though they had been dropped in a hurry or knocked over. The small rubber boots, the ones with the yellow frogs, were later found near the back gate. Just the boots. Jacob had been wearing them when he went outside. They were found placed neatly beside the gate post, both boots upright as though set there deliberately. The back gate itself was ajar. Derek Turner called 911 at 10:32. The recording of that call would later be played in a courtroom. His voice, those who were present said, was steady, measured, not the fractured, hyperventilating scream of a father who has just realized his child is missing. A steady. The dispatcher asked him, "Sir, is there anyone else in the house with you?" And Derek Turner said, "No, it's just me." The swing in the backyard hung perfectly still. The toy truck lay on its side. The yellow frog boots sat beside the gate. And Jacob Turner was gone. The first Montrose County Sheriff's deputy arrived at Creekside Drive at 10:41 a.m., 9 minutes after the 911 call was placed. By 11:00 a.m., there were 3 patrol units on scene. By noon, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation had been notified. What followed over the next 72 hours was one of the largest ground searches in Montrose County history. More than 300 volunteers would eventually take part, organized in teams by the Montrose Search and Rescue Unit, and coordinated through a command post set up in the parking lot of a nearby church. Searchers moved in grids through the scrub fields behind the Turner property, through the drainage ditches along Creekside Drive, through the adjacent neighborhood blocks and the stretch of cottonwood forest that ran along the Uncompahgre River, a quarter-mile to the east. Cadaver dogs were brought in from Grand Junction. Helicopters swept the open terrain north and west. Dive teams checked a stock pond 800 yards from the property. The Uncompahgre River, running low in late September, was waded by searchers in a methodical, silent line. Nothing. No physical trace of Jacob Turner, not a thread of his red sweatshirt, not a footprint beyond the yard, not a child's handprint on a fence post or a broken branch in the brush, was found in those first 72 hours, or in the 72 hours that followed. The community of Montrose responded with the kind of anguish that small towns reserve for their own. Candlelight vigils were held. Yellow ribbons appeared on mailboxes and telephone poles. The diner on Main Street put Jacob's school photo in the front window. Teachers at Lincoln Elementary assembled care packages for Amanda Turner, who had arrived home from Olathe at 11:04 a.m. on September 27th, 2 minutes after the first deputy, and had not, witnesses said, stopped moving since. Searching, asking, driving the neighborhood, calling his name. Derek Turner was different. Those who knew him said that in the days following Jacob's disappearance, Derek was cooperative but remote. He answered questions fully, sat through repeated interviews at the sheriff's office without complaint, signed every consent form put in front of him. But people noticed things, small things, the kind of things that don't add up on paper but accumulate weight over time like sediment in still water. At the candlelight vigil on September 29th, While Amanda Turner stood at the microphone weeping and pressing Jacob's school photo to her chest, Derek stood slightly behind her and to the left, hands in his jacket pockets, his eyes scanning the crowd rather than the sky. Search coordinator Bill Hendricks would later recall in a recorded interview, "It was like he was watching for something. I don't know what. Just watching." Deputies whispered quietly, as deputies do, among themselves. There were timeline questions that nobody broadcast publicly, but that circulated through the investigation like a low current. Derek Turner said he had gone inside to make coffee and watch television at approximately 9:45. The coffee maker on the kitchen counter, noted in early scene documentation, contained a full, unused pot still in the basket with water in the reservoir, unbrewed. The television, when deputies checked it, was on a sports channel, but the set-top box showed the channel had last been changed at 8:49 a.m. A neighbor, 71-year-old Gerald Fenwick, who lived in the house directly behind the Turner property across an open field, told investigators he had been sitting on his back porch between 9:30 and 10:00 a.m., as was his habit on cool mornings. He had heard no sounds from the Turner yard, no child playing, no voices, no toy trucks rattling in a bucket. Nothing. Derek Turner's truck, the F-250, was parked in the driveway when deputies arrived. But it was noted in the scene report, almost as an afterthought, that the hood of the engine was warm when a deputy laid his hand on it during the initial walk-through. Warmer than ambient temperature, as though it had been driven recently. Investigators would later calculate that in 28 minutes, the window between Amanda leaving at 9:15 and Derek placing Jacob outside at 9:45, according to his own account, a person could drive from Creekside Drive to any of 4 potential rural locations within a 15-mile radius and return. The math was not evidence, but it was a shape, an outline drawn in what wasn't there. The CBI formally opened an investigative file on Derek Turner in October 2009, but they had nothing they could take to a prosecutor, no physical evidence, no witnesses, a warm hood and a cold coffee pot and a neighbor who heard only silence. Derek Turner maintained his account consistently. He was cooperative. He was present. He expressed grief in the ways that grief is supposed to present, just not quite in the ways it actually does. By spring of 2010, with no new leads, the active search for Jacob Turner was scaled back. By August of that year, the case was officially reclassified as a cold case by the Montrose County Sheriff's Office, though 2 CBI investigators remain nominally assigned. The case file, photographs, interview transcripts, forensic assessments, the neighbor's statement about the silence in the yard went into a box. The box went onto a shelf. The swing on Creekside Drive hung still. The toy truck still sat in a bucket on the back porch, where no one had touched them. And the question that lived in the file, unasked out loud by anyone who had official standing to ask it, was this: where did a 34-year-old man go in his truck between 9:15 and 9:45 on a Sunday morning? And why did no one ask him that question until it was nearly too late? Time does not stop because a child is missing. That is one of the cruelest truths in the universe of grief. The sun keeps coming up over the mountains. The aspens turn gold again and again. Bills arrive. The school bus stops at the corner. Life insists on continuing, even when the person living it cannot find a reason to agree. By January 2010, Amanda Turner had returned to work at the dental office, 3 days a week, then 4, because the quiet of the house had become something she could not endure. Brianna went back to school. The yellow ribbons on the mailboxes faded and were not replaced. In the way that communities must do to survive, Montrose moved forward, carrying Jacob Turner as a name that surfaced at certain anniversaries, a photograph still behind the register at the diner, an annual vigil on September 27th that drew smaller crowds each year. Amanda and Derek Turner moved out of the Creekside Drive house in March 2010. The back gate, the bucket of trucks, the swing, they could not stay there with all of that waiting for them every morning. They rented a house on the other side of Montrose, a beige two-story on a street lined with similar houses, the kind of street where you can disappear into ordinariness. But ordinariness was not something the Turner marriage could sustain. For those who have ever lived beside a grief they could not name, a sorrow whose source they could not speak aloud, the years between 2010 and 2015 inside the Turner household will have a familiar shape. A shape made of silences at the dinner table, of doors closed too firmly, of a husband and wife who move around each other in the kitchen as though orbiting separate centers of gravity, never quite touching. Amanda Turner would later describe those years in a recorded victim advocate interview. She said, "I knew something. I knew something the way you know a smell, not clearly, not in words, but in your body. I would look at him and I would feel something wrong in my chest, the way you feel wrong when you are standing near an edge. And then I would tell myself, you cannot think that. You cannot think that about the father of your children. I had Brianna to raise. I had to get up in the morning, so I didn't think it." She paused in that recording. Then she said, "I was thinking it, I just wouldn't let myself know." Brianna Turner grew from 8 years old into 13, then 15, then 17. She was, by accounts from teachers and family friends, a quiet and observant child who processed her brother's loss in ways that surfaced periodically in her school counselor's office, and more privately, in drawings that she kept in a sketchbook under her bed. Several of those drawings, later described by the counselor, depicted a recurring image, a small figure in a red sweatshirt, standing at a distance from a larger figure whose back was turned. Brianna never spoke about those drawings to her parents. She did speak, haltingly, reluctantly, in the way that children speak when they are testing the weight of something they have carried alone for years, to her high school best friend, Cassidy Ullman, during their junior year. In a text message exchange from December 2016, which would not be reviewed by investigators until nearly 2 years later, Brianna wrote, "Sometimes I think about the morning Jake disappeared, and I remember things I never told anyone. I don't know what to do with them." Cassidy Ullman wrote back, "What things?" Brianna's response was 3 words, "Things I saw." The exchange ended there. Neither of them spoke of it again for nearly a year. Amanda and Derek Turner formally separated in the summer of 2016 and finalized their divorce in February 2017. In the divorce proceedings, there was nothing that signaled the ground about to shift, no dramatic accusations, no extraordinary claims. Amanda cited irreconcilable differences. Derek did not contest. He moved to a duplex in Delta, Colorado, 25 miles north, and took a supervisory job with a different paving company. He paid his child support. He saw Brianna on alternating weekends. To look at the shape of his life from the outside, you would see a man rebuilding after loss. A man weathered by grief and a failed marriage, carrying on in the quiet, stubborn way of men who live in places like western Colorado and don't talk much about what's inside them. But if you looked at Brianna Turner's face when she came home from those alternating weekends, if you watched the way she closed the car door softly and walked toward the house with her shoulders slightly raised, the way a person walks when they have spent the last 48 hours holding a part of themselves very still, you might have noticed something. Her mother noticed it. She noticed it for years. She told herself it was grief. She told herself it was the normal damage of growing up without a brother, of watching your family fracture and fall. Then, in September 2018, 9 years after Jacob disappeared, 1 year after the divorce was finalized. Brianna Turner drove home from her freshman year of college for the long weekend of her brother's disappearance anniversary. She sat at the kitchen table with her mother on a Saturday evening while rain came down in sheets against the windows. And she said, "Mom, I have to tell you something I saw the morning Jacob went missing." Amanda Turner would later describe the sound of those words as the sound of the floor giving way under her feet. Clear's throat. The swing hung still, the toy trucks lay untouched, and 9 years of silence were about to end. What Brianna Turner had kept locked inside herself since she was 8 years old began with a fact that seemed, at first, almost too small to matter. On the morning of September 27, 2009, Brianna had not, as her father believed, been at her friend's house across town. She had been dropped off there the night before, yes, but she had woken early before 7:00 a.m. and called her father to ask him to come pick her up. The friend's older brother, Brianna said, had been unkind to her the night before. She wanted to come home. Derek Turner had come and picked her up. He had arrived at the friend's house on Cascade Avenue at approximately 7:45 a.m. and driven Brianna back toward Creekside Drive. But he had not gone directly home. He had taken what Brianna, at 8 years old, had accepted simply as the long way, a route through the open country roads west of town, winding out past the fields and the old grain elevator, and down a rural track that Brianna didn't know the name of. She had been in the back seat. She had been half asleep looking out the window, not entirely paying attention. But she had seen her father stop the truck. She had seen him get out. She had kept her eyes mostly closed because she was tired and she thought it was nothing. Maybe he was checking something on the truck. Maybe he needed to do something outside. She had seen him open the tailgate. She had seen him carry something wrapped in a moving blanket, the kind they kept in the truck bed for moving furniture, something that was heavy, something that did not move. She was 8 years old. She did not know what she was seeing, or she knew in the way a body knows things before the mind has language for them, and she chose, in the survival mechanism that children deploy when the truth is too large to hold, not to know. She had closed her eyes. She had pretended to be asleep. Her father had gotten back in the truck. He had driven home. He had carried her inside. She had kept her eyes closed and put her on the couch in the living room with a blanket over her. And then, approximately 45 minutes later, according to the timeline that investigators would spend weeks reconstructing, he had reported his son missing. Brianna Turner told her mother this story on the evening of September 29, 2018, a Saturday, the anniversary weekend of her brother's disappearance, rain hammering the windows on South 3rd Street in Montrose. She told it in the careful, deliberate way of someone who has rehearsed it 10,000 times and is still not certain the words will hold. Amanda Turner called the Montrose County Sheriff's Office the following Monday morning, October 1, 2018. She said, "My daughter witnessed something the morning my son disappeared 9 years ago. I think you need to hear what she has to say." Clear's throat. The cold case file on Jacob Turner was reopened that same week. The CBI assigned a new lead investigator, Special Agent Donna Vasquez, who had experience with long-dormant cases, and who would later describe the Brianna Turner interview as one of the most difficult and most important she had ever conducted. Brianna was interviewed formally on October 9, 2018, at the Montrose County Sheriff's Office. The interview lasted 4 hours and 20 minutes. She was composed in the way that only a person who has carried something alone for a very long time can be composed, not emotionless, but organized around the emotion, the way a person wraps a wound tightly before they can bear to show it. In her statement, Brianna said, and the recording preserves this exactly, "I was in the backseat and I was pretending to sleep. I saw my dad stop on a dirt road. I saw him walk to the back of the truck. He opened the tailgate and he took something out. It was wrapped in the moving blanket, the gray one we had in the truck. It was heavy. He carried it toward the field. He was gone for a little while, maybe 5 minutes, maybe longer. Then he came back and got in and we drove home. I didn't say anything. I didn't tell anyone. I was 8 years old and I didn't know. I think I knew, but I didn't know. I have lived with this for 9 years. I need someone to do something with it." Investigators moved immediately to identify the specific location Brianna was describing. She had been 8, half asleep, riding in the backseat of a truck in a part of the county she wasn't familiar with. But she remembered the grain elevator. She remembered the way the road curved left before her father stopped. She remembered a stand of cottonwood trees to the right of the truck. Working with aerial photography, county road maps, and 2 drive-thrus with Brianna in the passenger seat, investigators narrowed the location to a stretch of County Road 58W, approximately 11 miles west-northwest of the Turner property on Creekside Drive. Ground-penetrating radar was deployed to a field adjacent to County Road 58W on October 22, 2018. The work was conducted quietly, without media notification. On October 24, 2018, at approximately 2:15 in the afternoon, the remains of a small child were located in a shallow, subsurface depression in that field, approximately 40 yards from the road's edge, beneath a stand of cottonwood trees whose leaves had already long since fallen into the damp, dark earth. Forensic analysis would confirm the remains as those of Jacob Turner, age 5, through dental records and DNA comparison. The cause of his passing, determined by forensic pathology, pointed to blunt force trauma consistent with impact from a large, flat surface. The kind of analysis that investigators would later align, through evidence reconstruction, with the flat metal bed of a pickup truck. Derek Turner was arrested on November 7, 2018, at his duplex in Delta, Colorado, at 6:14 in the morning. 2 Delta County Sheriff's deputies and Special Agent Donna Vasquez were present. By accounts from a neighbor who witnessed the arrest, Derek Turner walked to the patrol car without resistance. He said nothing. His face, the neighbor described, was completely still. News of the arrest broke across Colorado media within hours. The Montrose Daily Press ran it as a front-page story. Father Arrested in 2009, cold case disappearance of Montrose boy. The story was picked up by the Denver Post, then by National Wire Services. Comment sections and Facebook groups and true crime forums lit up with the particular mixture of grief, fury, and grim validation that attends the breaking of a long silence. Those who had always believed it was him said, "We knew. We always knew." Those who had believed Derek Turner was a grieving father, his coworkers, his neighbors from the new neighborhood, men he'd worked with in the years since the divorce, said, with varying degrees of defensiveness and devastation, "Not Derek. That can't be Derek. I would have known." For those who have ever been shocked by something they perhaps, in some corner of themselves, always suspected, who have ever discovered that someone they trusted quietly held a secret that rewrote everything they thought they knew, the reaction of Derek Turner's community will be recognizable. Not because people are naive, but because the mind protects itself. Because we build a picture of the people we know and we live inside that picture. And when the picture breaks, the breaking is its own kind of loss. Derek Turner entered a guilty plea on March 14, 2019, in Montrose County District Court. He was sentenced on May 3, 2019, to life in the Colorado Department of Corrections without the possibility of parole. He made no statement at sentencing. He sat in the defendant's chair with his hands flat on the table in front of him and stared at the wall above the judge's bench. If he heard Amanda Turner's victim impact statement, delivered in a voice that shook only twice, at the beginning and at the very end, he gave no indication. Amanda Turner said in part, "You took my son from me. You took him from his sister. You took him from everyone who loved him, and then you made us search for him for 9 years. 9 years we looked for him and you already knew where he was. You always knew where he was. I don't have words that are large enough for what you did, so I'm just going to say his name. Jacob Matthew Turner. He was 5 years old. He collected rocks and toy trucks and he laughed like bells. And he deserved to grow up." She sat down. The courtroom was very quiet. Outside the courthouse, on a mild May afternoon, a small group had gathered with photographs, Jacob's school photo, the one that had spent 10 years behind the register at the diner on Main Street. They held the photographs and they stood in the sun, and they did not say very much, because some things have already been said in all the years of waiting, and what remains at the end of a case like this is not satisfaction. It is never satisfaction, but something quieter and harder and more enduring. It is recognition. The recognition that a small boy with rubber boots printed with yellow frogs was here and mattered and is still carried. The Jacob Turner case, in the years since Derek Turner's conviction, has been studied by cold case investigators and victim advocacy organizations as an example of both the failures and the eventual persistence of the justice system. It took a decade. It took a daughter's quiet, devastating courage, the courage of a woman who had been an 8-year-old girl in a backseat, carrying a weight no child should ever carry for the better part of her life. Montrose County, in the aftermath of the case, revised several protocols around how early witness interviews are conducted in missing child cases, specifically around the question of who was in the vehicle and who may have been present in the household in the hours prior to a disappearance. Those revisions were named informally, within the department, after Jacob. Brianna Turner graduated from college in 2022 with a degree in social work. She now advocates for children who are navigating family trauma. She does not speak publicly about her brother's case, and that boundary is hers to hold. Amanda Turner still lives in Montrose. The diner on Main Street, which has changed hands twice since 2009, still keeps Jacob's photograph in the window. Some things a community holds onto not out of habit, but out of love. The field on County Road 58W, 11 miles west-northwest of the house where Jacob Turner grew up and left his toy trucks on the windowsill, is unremarkable from the road. Just a field. Cottonwood trees on one edge, their leaves going gold in autumn as they always have, as they will again this year. You would drive past it without knowing. Most people do. But somewhere in the record, in the court transcripts and the case files and the long, slow accumulation of a decade's worth of unanswered questions finally answered, Jacob Turner exists. Not as a cold case number, not as a statistic, as a child who was here, who was real, whose laugh sounded like bells tumbling down a staircase, who deserved, more than anything, to grow up. Clears throat. Justice arrived. It was late and imperfect, and it could not return what was taken, but it came. And in the places where it comes late, it comes carrying the weight of all the years it took, and that weight, at least, is something true. If this story mattered to you, if Jacob's name is one you will carry, subscribe and hit the bell. Share this episode. Someone, somewhere, may still be waiting to be heard. In memory of Jacob Matthew Turner, 2004-2009.